Hello and thanks for checking in with Crossroads over this Christmas period with me, Lee Bannister. Now Crossroads is the iconic Midlands soap opera which ran from 1964 to 1988 and again from 2001 to 2003. And in the early days of Big Centre TV you'll probably remember that we ran many of the early episodes from the programme's first decade beginning in 1965. Well, this week and next week we're going to catch up with a few more, some that you might just have missed the first time round. And alongside them we have these special editions of Crossroads Check-In with a brand new interview with Jane Rossington, who was there present throughout the whole of the show's original run. Now you'll remember that we spoke with Jane at length during the summer, but we only really scratched the surface. Now we can talk with her about a whole lot more. And straight after this show you can see 3 episodes back to back, numbers 126, 500 and 1884, and they're all special in their own way. Now number 126 is actually the earliest surviving episode by quite a distance. It's from April 1965 and for many years it was thought to have been lost, as are many of the episodes from the show's first 17 years. But only a few years ago this and a couple of other episodes were rediscovered, and it's the only way to see what Crossroads was like right at the beginning. The zooming logo of the opening, the stylish way of going between scenes, a little bit of the rare out of the studio filming, and of course the original version of the famous motel reception. Just have a look beyond the front doorway. Now Jill and Sandy aren't in this episode, but Meg Richardson and Hugh Mortimer are present, but it would take them another 10 years from this point to tie the knot. Next up will be a show from November 1966, and this was the milestone 500th episode, and it was the end of a week which built up to a great big wedding. It also features a familiar face in the form of Sue Nichols, who went on to star in another ATV classic, Pipkins. Not forgetting, of course, being Gail's mum Audrey in Coronation Street. And then we're going to be having a look at episode 1884 from March 1973. Now all of these episodes are in black and white, even this one from March 1973, although it wasn't made that way. It was originally made in colour, of course, but then the master tape was lost. Luckily, a black and white film print had been made so that the episode could potentially be sold to countries which as yet weren't broadcasted in colour. Oh, and that explains why you won't see the ATV logo at the beginning. It shows you a company called ITC. Now they were ATV's sister company who looked after selling the programmes around the world. Anyway, that's all still to come. But before any of that, it's time to catch up with Jane Rossington for more of her memories from her time on the Midlands' very own serial.
I remember the first day. So this was new to us all. And we turned up and there was the reception desk, which was quite high actually, and very useful because you could hide things down below, so scripts and useful things like that. Then you entered through this revolving door, which was, I mean, it looked very, just like a motel. It was fabulous. But the snag is it had glass in, so it picked up the lights and everything and just reflected everything. So we ground to a halt within about 5 seconds. Stop! Start again. Right, we've got to do something about it. And they couldn't do anything, actually, I don't think, about the actual door. But they had to keep cutting away from it when it was showing the studio. And then the set got a bit bigger. Now, let me think, what else was there? There was a kitchen. Now, that was really quite clever, except it was very odd. I say I'm standing here at the desk. Directly behind me, there was not a door, I think it was a curtain, and behind that was the kitchen. Now, very strange, and you'd enter the kitchen through there, and equally if you left the kitchen you'd come out and come into the reception desk, not the reception area where people would be coming in. And most things worked, so much so that I did have a scene I remember with Roger playing Sandy. So I was doing a lot of plot in the kitchen and sort of saying, have you heard the latest about what's going on at the post office? And Roger's going, oh yeah. And we're actually doing that as a kind of for the people who'd missed an episode so they could catch up. He'd put some toast on, and of course it got jammed and smoke was coming out, and I think I could see it but he couldn't, but he was smelling it and thinking, what do I do?
Oh dear.
And there was chaos going on around me with people coming up with fire blankets and all that, and we just kept going and we kept on.
That's all you can do though, isn't it?
Yeah, we just carried on, and then eventually they said we're going to have to stop, and I mean we never stopped, but it was on fire. So, and then they threw this blanket thing over it. But things like that, everything was very small compared to how you looked at it on the set. It always looked much bigger. Yeah. And the whole reception area as such, you had an area where you would say, if this is the reception desk, perhaps people would enter from an area down there, and it could be anything. It could be the way to Nolly's sitting room. It could be the way to the ballroom. We don't think we ever had a ballroom, no, but other sort of the dining room and all
elsewhere
that.
In the motel,
elsewhere in the motel. And sometimes it was elsewhere in the motel was this way. You know, it just depended
no
on
geography of it.
No proper geography. It was very comforting to be there because, as I say, you could have your script underneath. You couldn't get to see it, but it meant in between scenes you could have quick and check something. So that was good.
You mentioned Nolly's sitting room. That didn't change for years, did it? All the way through to the 80s?
No, that was iconic in all sorts of ways. I mean, there was a picture of me in there, painted, and a picture of Roger, painted. We both gave photographs to this most wonderful set designer, who was a real artist, and he took these two pictures, blew them up, put them in some oval frames, and then painted over them, because they were black and white, so he painted over them. And in fact, I think in the painting, I've got it now, he painted me, I had plaits. It was a photograph of me when I was 8, and the same, Roger was about 5 or something. And he tried to make us look very similar, you know, brother and sister. And he was just brilliant. And I've still got that, but he's got red ribbon on my pigtails, and I knew that the dress that I was wearing was blue and dotted, and it was all. We had those lovely smocked things, and I was supposed to be about 7 or 8, and so I seemed to wear. It was a photograph of me at the age of that sort of age, and I knew it would be blue, but it was not. It was red, and so I knew there was those two. They were there. Then we had various things that came and went. We occasionally had a piano. As if it was always there, but it wasn't always there. It was on the third wall. Yeah. You know?
So beyond where you see.
And there was the table. A lot of things went on at the table. And actually, there were some wonderful moments I can remember. You also, when you opened the door and walked in, sometimes you had to walk in without the door being actually open. Yeah. So you got through it quickly, and they weren't on you as you came in, because sometimes we were so pushed for space, there'd be another set there.
So they didn't build the corridor?
No. Well, if they could get the corridor in, they did, and they had a grandfather clock, very old one, which one of the prop boys supplied, and he was paid rent for this. He made a fortune out of this grandfather clock, because it was always in the shot. Because if you walked in and opened the door, and we walked in, you'd see the grandfather clock. But just occasionally, they had too many problems and had to leave that bit out. Because we were in a very small studio. It wasn't the big studio. We were only allocated second studio. And consequently, it was a big, long rectangle, and the main sets were on the long bits, right? The odd sets that we only needed that week, maybe a telephone box with somebody in a panic. There's been an accident, come immediately. You know, that's all it was. Yeah. Would just be a bit of it, and you'd have a very tight shot, so you didn't see the rest. But what else? Let me think. I can remember wonderful things. There was the door, and the odd occasions when there's somebody happened to be the other side who shouldn't have been there, and you'd open the door and they went and disappeared, but just caught a glimpse of them. There was another time when we were doing tea. I'm always nip-rat, because again we were doing it. We were running from one set to another, and I was changing my clothes sometimes on the way, ripping that off. That was last night. That was over there. Now I'm in. You know, today I'd got my other outfit on, and I pick up the tray, and somebody opens the door for me, and I push it through and kick it to my. And I look down, and it's a big coffee pot instead of a teapot, and I'm thinking, right, okay, do you want a cup of tea? And I'm thinking, does anyone notice that this is quite obviously a teapot? You know, not a teapot, it's a coffee pot, and things like that were hysterical.
How'd you catch your breath? You know, when you're running from set to set.
Oh, it was great fun. Yeah. But the thing is, kept you on your toes, and it was fun. It was a bit naughty, really, but we really enjoyed ourselves. And because you were doing it in story order, we stopped at halfway for the commercial break. How did we get through that? I mean, there's other times of. There was a time when we had not a dinner party. It was a sort of dinner party, and it was David, who played my cousin, and me and a couple of other people. We're all sitting around this table, and it's really difficult, a round table. because we were supposed to be passing things to one another and pouring and doing that. And you lean forward into somebody else's shot. So you're having to try and do it all aware of the fact that you're not going to go across them. And we did this, and it was a very complex scene and quite difficult, and there was a lot going on in it, and we're all doing our interrupting and everything. And we got to the end, and David Fennell, that was right, played my cousin, was sitting next to me, and he got up and went, whew, and turned and walked straight into one of the flats and knocked it over.
OK, time for a quick break now, but when we come back, we'll return to the lounge to hear more from Jane Rossington. Welcome back to our Christmas check-in at the Crossroads Motel. Remember, after this show, we've got 3 episodes back-to-back from 1965, 1966 and 1973. But before then, let's return to the lounge now to hear more in our brand new interview from Crossroads' very own Jane Rossington.
We had different directors, you see. We had Reg producers. Well, Reg was a main producer for the first 11 years. So it was done his way. And he had lots of experience working in Australia. And he was the one who really championed the whole show and said it can be done. So after 11 years, he suddenly decided he wanted to go back to Australia. And indeed had a fantastic career after that, because he had Neighbours started, and young doctors and all that sort of young doctor, whatever it was. And he was working away, and he's still, I mean, I haven't seen him for years, but I saw him about 10, 15 years ago, and he came over to England, and he came out to have supper with us at home, and it was wonderful to see him. He looked just the same, just a little thinner, you know, maybe a little less up here, but just the same. And he was just that lovely. Hello, Jane. He was super. After that, we had Jack Barton, who was a very different person, but very efficient and again very experienced. And he had worked. He had taken time out from television because he was offered a job by the Duke of Bedford. Duke of Bedford was in a bit of trouble at Woburn Abbey, and he was trying to work out how to make having, you know, a property like that work. And he wanted to encourage people to come and see it and all that. Anyway, Jack was the man for him. But one of the things Jack did do, he got a lot of Americans over, and he said to them, oh yeah, you can see the Duke. You'll see, he's probably coming down this corridor in a minute, and you should get the Duke to put his ermine and his coronet on. And I know that he said that the Duke was going, do I really have to do all this? He said, go, just for me, because once word gets round, you'll have all these Americans coming over, and they'll all spend a fortune, which indeed I think they did. And he had to walk across. All he had to do was walk out of one door and disappear into the other, and it worked a treat. And, you know, Jack was much lauded for this idea and whatever. So he'd moved in rather exotic circles, well, rather upmarket circles. And then he came back to television, and he was directing when Reg was producing. And he was a super director and very easygoing and terrific fun and very stylish. And then he suddenly took over as producer, and he was smashing. And the great thing about Jack, sorry, I'm getting off all these subjects, but I mean, one topic leads to another, you know. And then I was getting married to Tony. Now, I've fast-forwarded quite a long way. And Jack was always aware of publicity and everything, and he said, I think we're going to film this at Alvechurch. And I said, oh, I like Alvechurch. And off we went to Alvechurch, and that was all. The whole crew went and everything. And I wonder what was going on. There was a lot of helicopters drifting around, and he'd fed them some story or other, and they were not sure. And they were filming us. But obviously they couldn't get in the church. But they were filming us going in and coming out and everything, and they wanted photographs for their papers and things. I think the Mirror and the Star and all those papers. And I couldn't quite get what was going on, because we did do a scene inside which went out, but it was nothing to do with what we were doing outside. We did all this stuff outside, which was really just for publicity.
Yes.
And I said to Jack, what was all that about? And he said, well, no, man, the ratings will go up. And of course they did. But things like that, he was always thinking about that. We did a lot of filming at the Golden Valley, which was great fun going down there. And in fact, it was just before he'd decided to leave that he said to me, are you going on the bus? Because they always run a bus out from the studios to where we were filming. He said, are you going on the bus? And I said, well, I think I'd quite like to go take my car because I'll go and see some friends who live close by. He said, yeah, good idea. He said, because I've got something to give you. And when I got there, I didn't see Jack, he was far too busy. But suddenly one of the prop boys came over and said, I've got this parcel for you. Can I put it in the boot of your car? And I said, yeah, OK. What is it? He said, I don't know. I said, OK. Popped it in my car. When I got home, I undid it. And it was the two paintings off the set. Oh. And it was Roger, the one of Roger and the one of me. And I think the next day or something, I bumped into him somewhere and I said, what was all that about, Jack? He said, darling, the show is all changing. He said, I'm not going to be here anymore and I would like you to have those two pictures. And sure enough, everything changed and more producers came in and things changed. But Jack was really, it was really Reg and Jack did the first sort of 20 years.
Yes, yeah.
Or the other set that was hysterical, very iconic. When I was living at the Harvey household, right, we had very tight to get all these sets in. And we had the sofa belonging to the Harvey household. And you had to walk round the sofa to get, they had some stairs that came down onto the sitting room. So you go up the stairs and disappear. Now the snag is, there was, usually there was a wall, not always, but at the other time there would be a gap. Oh. So you had to stop at the top and wait till they'd cut off that scene and gone to another scene. Yeah. Then I could climb down carefully. You know, occasionally I got a stool, but not always. And if it was that, you just stood there and waited till you were absolutely convinced, or somebody would say, you got that. So, and that was great fun. And we had, but you see, you couldn't be seen. As you walked across the room, now when I say the room, it was 6 feet, if that. It wasn't really a room. You've got a camera around. So you're walking, and you can't be seen to sort of be... we actually had to climb over the end bits of the sofa to get onto the steps. So they had to always cut away. Well, they didn't always cut away quite fast enough. And you trying to... And there am I climbing over this arm to get onto the stairs. Oh, so that was one of the problems with that set. And we also had this little extra set, which was the kitchen, and I had to cook things on a stove. And I think, I'm not sure, but I have a feeling I had to light a gas, you know, with it was a really old, supposed to be a really old kitchen with a very old cooker. And that was quite scary because, you know, it's quite bad enough doing that. I mean, people won't remember all this, but it's not like that now. You turn on a gas cooker, and it starts. Yeah. But they didn't in the old, original ones, and that's the type we had. So that was a bit of a nightmare. Certainly iconic, but a nightmare. And one trembled, thinking, am I going to set fire to the set?
They got somebody with a tin of Calagas just offset with a little pipe going on.
God. But there was things like that. Oh, and the other thing about iconic sets, we had a stage when we were based at Aston. This is the early days. Yeah. And we had a super floor manager, Peter, who was wonderful and great fun. And he was very involved with Tinger and Tucker and all that.
With G. Morton?
Yeah, and all that. And but he was great fun. And I can remember turning up one day and we came onto the set and he said, right, everybody, we've got to be careful. We're having a bit of trouble with the roof. And there's water coming in. Can I point out to you, there's a bucket over here, and there's a bucket, you know. But even so, things got knocked over.
Oh dear.
And you're standing there, and you can hear the rain. Yeah. The back of the studios, it wasn't a proper studio. It was an old cinema, but it was really old. And the front part looked frightfully smart. and very modern. But that was a little office bit that they'd built on the front, where they had a big television set, and there was the programme as you walked in, and very smart girls standing behind the desk with beautiful hairdos and what have you, and false eyelashes. It was the era of false eyelashes. But then really what was going on was this rain was coming through the roof as you stood there, and you're thinking, it's dripping on my hair. Never mind, but great fun.
That's the glamour of it, isn't it?
Yeah. So those are the sets I can sort of think of. They didn't all work that well, but some worked beautifully, so what the hell?
And they're well remembered.
Yeah, and they also, all you need really is a backing.
Oh, yeah.
You can make a bit of backing maybe with one bit, so an L shape. That's the set.
That's what we've got here.
Yeah. Iconic,
No
darling.
real bricks. And Jane will be back with us again in the second of these special Crossroads check-in shows at the same time next week. Right, time to put the kettle on now and settle down for 3 back-to-back episodes, 126, 500 and 1884. But don't check out, as we'll have another 3 for you at the same time next week, which by then will be next year. I'll see you then.